Hello, my name is Anya, and today we're going to add a messaging system to our Bubble applications. So a user is able to send as many messages as they want to any other user on the platform, and there's also some way to track whether the messages have been read or not. The first thing I want to do is go over here and show you my database. So I have the user data type, which is standard. And then I also have a conversation data type. And this has recency, which is when was the last time this conversation someone sent a message on it. Unread, which is the list of users who haven't read any message that's part of this conversation, and then users, which is the list of users involved in this conversation. Here I have a message data type which maps to a conversation. The reason I did it this way, where a message maps to a conversation as opposed to a conversation having a list of messages, is because this has the potential to become a really, really long list, and it's just better to design to store it this way. Additionally, I have the sender, which is a user field. You could store this with the creator field, but I just think it's easier, especially when I'm teaching others, to have it this way so you can really understand who's sending, what's going on. And then text content. Right now we're just dealing with really simple text messages, and we can see that here. Now let's set up the UI. Just a disclaimer, I'm not going to focus on making it look too nice because I think you can experiment and practice with that on your own time. I'm just going to get the very broad strokes down so it's easy to see and test the functionality. For starters, this index page is going to be of container layout row, and I'm just going to have it left aligned for now. I'm going to drag a repeating group a regular group, and this is going to be group conversations. This is going to be a column. It's going to stretch all the way with actually a max width of 500, so not all the way, and it's just currently fitting its height to its content, which is fine. I'm just going to add some padding all around because I think it makes it a little easier to look at. And we can drag in some text. Let's make this a little bigger. This is going to say conversations. And let's get 32 pixels of gap spacing as well, and just add in a repeating group. So this repeating group is going to be a row layout. It's going to stretch all the way across the available space, and it's just currently fitting its height to content, which is fine. This type of content is going to be a conversation. It's going to store all of the conversations, and this could be as many. So I'm not going to set a fixed number of rows. I'm going to set the min height of the row to be 50, just enough to see kind of the text of the conversation. And then I'm going to set the data source to be all of the conversations where users contains our current user. Then inside this, I can just add a text box. I'm going to make this center aligned, can stretch as much as needed, and it's just going to fit height to content. You can make this anything. You can actually have a conversation, add a field called title, and show that over here for a group chat or something. But right now, I'm just going to make it the current cell's conversations, users, and then each item's email. So it's just going to be a comma list of all of the users. But it's a little redundant to see your own email, so I'm going to just say minus item, current user's email. So just get rid of that. And we'll just see a list of all of the emails of users we have a conversation with. I want to group this text in a row container, and this is going to allow us to do a couple things. For starters, if I go in here and grab that container, it'll allow us to change the color. So I'm going to say when current sales conversations unread contains current user, inside this group, I actually want to add an icon. So I'm just going to drag it inside the group, and let's make this a circle. Again, you can make this look a lot nicer. But this serves my purposes for right now. 20 by 20, just get a tiny circle in there. Go back here just because it's bothering me. Let's just add 16 pixels over here. Now, I don't want the circle available all the time, and I also want it to collapse when hidden. So I'm going to say it's not visible on page load. This circle is just meant to show you that this conversation has messages that are unread. So what I need to do is I need to say when the pair group's conversations unread contains current user, when there are messages that this user hasn't seen, then and only then this element is going to be visible. And that just makes it so that when there are unread messages, we'll see this tiny dot. Okay, we have the conversation side set up. I'm going to go on this group conversations and give it a max height of 700. Whoops. Give it a fixed height of 700. So we're not like scrolling all over the place. It's just one set height. And I'm going to drag in another group over here. This is going to be group messages. And it's actually going to be an align to parent. It's going to stretch all the available space and again have a fixed height of 700. So these two line up nicely. I'm going to go ahead and add the same padding I did on the other side, just to make it a little easier on the eyes, and drag a group in here on the bottom. This is going to be group input, and it's going to be a row, stretch the available space, and have a minimum height of 50. Here I'm just going to drag an input into the group we have. And this is going to be where someone would draft their message. It's going to have a fixed height of 48 pixels of roundness. Now that we have an input, we need some sort of icon to allow the user to send their message. So I'm just going to use this airplane. You can make it look better, experiment with nicer icons, and I'm just going to put it in the middle over there, as well as add 8 pixels of gap in between those. So we have the basic structure. The only thing we're missing is some sort of way to display the messages. So I'm going to drag a repeating group onto here and actually dock it to the bottom. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a bottom margin of 50. So that way it sits right on top of this input really nicely. We're going to give it as much space as possible and just say fit height to content. And actually, we're not going to save that height to content. So we're just going to let it stretch all the way to the top, and then it's going to become scrollable if it exceeds that. You can set that up later. Right now I'm going to set a fixed number of rows, and the min height is just going to be 50, but it can grow to expand if the text in it is more. And each cell is going to have an align to parent layout. Now I'm just going to drag some groups into the cell. So inside this tiny repeating group, I'm going to add a group, and this is going to be group text. It's going to be a row as well. It's not fixed width, I'm just going to let it stretch the whole way, but I'm actually only going to let it stretch 50%, and you'll see why in a sec. And I'm going to say the min height is 50, so the same as it would be for our other group, and just fit height to content. So this will grow if the text inside it gets too large. I'm going to add some margins all around, add 8 pixels of brownness. I'm actually going to give it a flat color as a background. And this is just so that, let's make it a min height of 48, so that you get those nice colored blocks that you get on messages. So when someone else sends it, it's a gray, and when you send it, it's a blue. Inside this group, I'm just going to drag a text. I'm going to just let it stretch the available thing and give it a min height of 40. And give it no min height and let it just sit nicely in the middle. And this is going to read parent groups thing. Actually, we don't have the logic set up for that yet. I'm just going to click on this group text and add some internal padding. Maybe 8 is too much, so we can do 4. Yeah, I'm not too focused on design. I just want to give you a rough idea of all of the fun things you can do. Now I'm going to copy paste this group again. Oops. Paste it and drag it over to the other side. So now we have these two identical groups. I'm just going to set the max at 40%. So there's a little bit better spacing. Okay, now that we have it set up like this, let's add a little functionality because this is looking great. Just one thing on the text, let's make it left aligned. So my texts are like this and your texts are like this. On this repeating group, let's add a data source, and it's going to be of type messages. But in order to know which messages to show, we need to know which conversation we are currently on. So on our page index, I'm going to add a custom state called conversation, and it's going to be of type conversation. It's just going to store whatever the user is currently clicked on. Then on this repeating group, we can add a data source, and we can do a search for all of the messages in the database where the conversation is our page's custom state conversation. Now that we have that set up, we can go back to our tiny groups over here, and this can be group other, and this is group mine. So this is all of the texts. Let's make it of type message. All of the messages that I have sent. So I'm going to say when current cells messages sender is current user. When I've set this message, then this element is visible. Otherwise, it is not visible on page load. Likewise, over here, I'm going to say this is visible on page load, but when current cells messages sender is current user, then this element is not going to be visible. That way we can add some color to it. This is going to be a very light gray. I don't know where the gray comes from. And this one can be the blue. And you can make these groups look nicer, but this is the basic idea. Let's just change the text, parent groups, messages, text content, and this is going to be parent groups. Let's fix the parent group first. It's going to be of type content message, data source current cells message. So this is going to be parent groups, messages, text content as well. And that's looking great. Now we can get on starting some workflows. But firstly, just so that we can visually see which conversation we're on, I'm going to say when indexes conversation is current cells conversation, then the background style is going to be flat color, and the background color, we can just highlight it a little. So you can make it a lighter blue. Then let's go back here and add a workflow. When this is clicked, all I want to do is I want to set the state of our page indexes conversation to our current cells conversation. And let's preview this because we've done a lot of work in the editor, and I just want to see what this actually translates to. So here we can see that I can click on Dana's message and we get this sort of fun visual. And then I can click on Pete's and we see this conversation going on. Now we see this dot here, which means that there are some messages with Pete that aren't currently read. But now that I've clicked on it, I've seen it. So I want this dot to go away. So back here on our workflow, when we set the state of the current conversation to the current group's conversation, we also want to make changes to a thing. And the thing that we want to change is the current cells conversation. We want to set unread. We just want to remove the current user because given that I've clicked on it, it means that I have read the message. So now when I click on Pete, it removes that exactly how we want. So all of this is looking good. We can flip between these two. We see the proper messages. But now I want to be able to type something and send it. And we don't have that functionality set up. The first thing we want to do is go over here and say input should not be empty because we don't want someone to be able to send an empty message. Then we want to click on our icon over here, which I just messed up, and add a workflow. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a new thing of type message. The conversation is going to be the indexes conversation. The text content is going to be whatever our input, whatever's in our input, and the sender is just going to be the current user. Additionally, we need to make some changes to our indexes conversation. This involves changing the recency and unread. So unread is all of the list of users that haven't seen the most recent message, or any message for that matter. So when you send a new message, the users who haven't seen it are actually all of the users, excluding the current user. So we're just going to set that. So it's basically resetting our unread list because everyone hasn't read it. And then recency is how recently has someone sent a message. So given that you've just sent a message, our new recency is going to be the current date and time. And this is important because it allows us to sort our repeating group over here, which I will show you in a second. So now let's try this out. One last thing, actually we need to go down here to element actions and reset input. So any input that was used throughout here, input A, it's just going to be reset. So we don't have like clunky stuff left in here. I'm going to go to my conversation with Pete. I'm going to say, how are you doing? And click this button over here. It's going to send it to Pete. Just for reference, I want to show you what this looks like from Pete's perspective. Since I just sent a message, we can see that there's this unread sign over here. So we can click on it, see that, and this goes away. Let's go back to Anya. I just sent a message to Pete. So actually Pete should be the top conversation, but for some reason my conversation with Dana is still at the top. So what we need to do is go down here to our conversations repeating group. And when we search for conversations, we want to sort it by recency and descending. So the most recent one is at the top. Now, when I have a conversation with Dana and I say, hey, we can see that moves to the top, which is exactly what we want.